and welcome to ACT Math Test Overview and Tips for Teachers. My name is Kelly Remijan, and I am a Director at Large for the Illinois Council Teachers of Mathematics, as well as Director of STEM Initiatives for the Regional Office of Education number 40. Today I'd like to thank, first of all, ISBE for all the resources that they have available online. And in particular, I would like to thank Megan Forness, who is here today. She is the ISBE High School Assessment Coordinator. And so she's going to be here to be able to answer questions that you may have. If you want to place those in the chat box, she can answer those right away. And she also has shared for us an ACT helpline that you can also reach out with questions to their customer support. If you can't get questions through that helpline, you can also reach out to me or reach out to Megan. Lastly, I'd like to thank Kyle Harlow, who's helping me with the chat today. Kyle is a former ICTM board member. He's an active ICTM member currently, and he is a math teacher and department head at Heron High School. So I want to thank Kyle here for helping us out with the chat box. ISBE has lots of resources through the ISBE High School Assessment webpage. It's kind of a rabbit hole. Once you go here, it kind of takes you to all different kinds of things. So today I'm going to give you a slideshow and you'll have all the resources that kind of direct you to exactly what is available. So this presentation is hopefully going to help you out a lot. So today I'm going to talk about what you can do as a teacher to help students prepare for the ACT. So being able to inform students on the format, training students on test-taking strategies. And another thing you can do, tips, is actually to do an ACT test beforehand and calculate what your score would be. So hopefully then you can have your students do the same thing and you kind of know the process. Other things, incorporating matrices with other topics earlier in the curriculum, integrating AC type problems into daily work, providing students with AC problems with time restraints, as well as to go over them, and to give students the opportunity to do ACT practice tests and to analyze those problems that they got wrong, helping them understand what they need to do differently. So first of all, the ACT this year is 50 minutes compared to in the past 60 minutes. There are only 45 multiple choice questions compared to in the past, which was 60. There are 4 multiple choice answers instead of 5. And in this case with the ACT, the problems are going to increase in difficulty, starting off with the easy, medium, and finishing more with the high level, more difficult expert level questions, but still doable. And I'm going to show you some things that you can do to help your students. And in Illinois, all schools are to give the ACT as an online test unless that school has special allowance or if students have certain requirements that allow them to have a non-online test, a paper test. So the one thing that as a teacher that we need to make sure we make aware for our students, of course, that calculators are allowed. However, I will say that when I took this test, there's some place on the ACT where it says these problems all can be done without a calculator. No, they need to do. I did this test without a calculator for practice. No way. Do not. Everyone should have a calculator and they should do it. Use a calculator. There are handheld calculators allowed. However, I'm going to highly recommend that you have students utilize the Desmos calculator. It is a game changer, and I'm going to show you some things today, like total game changer using Desmos. And if you don't have your students using Desmos, there's time between now and then. Start incorporating it. You're going to see what I mean. Totally use this Desmos calculator. So informing the students of the format, I think is important, but honestly, it doesn't really matter. For you, I think it's good to know. It's good to know how they're kind of broken down in terms of the PHM, preparing for higher math, or the IES, integrating essential skills. To me, they're about 50-50. Okay. But you can see how it's broken down. What can we do? How can we train our students on test taking strategies? We're not teaching them to the test, but we need to tell them, we need to teach them what they can do to help themselves. Because we could have high achieving students and they're not maybe going to do okay because they're used to doing it a certain way. So first of all, have students pace themselves. They should answer all problems and they should guess, yes, guess if needed. Number two, the online test allows students to bookmark problems, and students should bookmark the problems to come back to. So they should never leave a problem blank. They should always at least guess and bookmark a problem. Never leave it blank. Students should know formulas and triangles, Pythagorean triples, very helpful. Special triangles, so helpful with this test. Students should read problems carefully. They should glance at those answer choices. Then they should work problems, having scratch paper, drawing pictures, and solving using different methods. It could be traditional math, which is what we're having them do usually on tests in class. But beyond traditional math, I highly recommend they just use calculator. Boom, calculator, done, move on. Also, using that built-in Desmos calculator. You're going to see, I'm telling you, it is a game changer, total game changer with this Desmos graphing calculator. Besides those methods, eliminating choices that they can kind of eliminate down to an answer or eliminating it down to maybe one of two answers. So if they've eliminated to two possible answers, now they have a 50% chance of guessing it right. So eliminating choices, picking numbers. There are strategic ways that we can have students pick numbers, and we can also teach students to back solve. And so I'm going to show you these things on what we as teachers can do to help train the students on what they can do, strategies they can take to do the best possible result on the ACT. First of all, pacing. Students should monitor their time. Now, the online test has a time counter up in the right-hand corner. So they can see how much time they have left, how much time has progressed. Students should not stay on a problem for too long. And again, they should answer every problem and then move on. If they have no clue how to do something, they need to guess and move on. Or if after they read 15 seconds of a problem and they don't know how to start, guess and move on. If they think it's going to take too long, guess. And before they move on, they can always bookmark it. It's something they can always bookmark it if it's something they think they could come back to and get. And if they've worked through a problem, and none of the answers choices are matching their solution, they're going to need to guess. But again, there are strategic ways that we can do this. Now, Gerakis Copes is an individual that last year he actually did a ACT prep in the Madison County ROE. And this is when the test was slightly different. Now, Gerakis, this is something he recommends, and you could always reach out to him if you're looking for more insight on the ACT. And he recommends that students take a piece of paper and before the test even starts, he recommends writing all 1 through 45 on a piece of paper. And then when they do a problem, he says to circle the problem that the student is going to come back to. He also recommends to diamond a problem that's too hard to come back to. So if it's a problem that it's too hard, diamond. So the circled ones, you want your students to for sure to come back to. He says to do all 45 problems in 35 minutes. This is what he recommends. leaving the last 15 minutes to go back and retry any of the circled problems that the students think they can do. But this circle and diamond method is something that Gerakis has developed. He says helps students so they can focus on going back. And what I'm saying is that bookmark method now with the online test, I think that to bookmark the ones that the students want to come back to. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. So again, pacing and guessing, very important. So the bookmark, second tip is the bookmark. So on the online test, when you look up at the top of the problem, you're going to see where it says bookmark. So a student can bookmark that. You'll see up there what looks like a little blue flag. So guess and bookmark. At the end of the test, you will see all of the problems, or actually during, you can review, and while the test is going, you could review, and you can see which problems are bookmarked. But at the end of the test, you'll have a whole, before you submit your answers, you'll be able to see the ones that are bookmarked, and you'll see if you didn't answer any problems. So this is a great checking tool with the online test. So at the end of the test, this is what it looks like. So you can easily see very quickly, the blue flags are my bookmarks, the ones I need to go back to, and I can just click on that problem. The yellow circles are the ones that haven't been answered. And so you can look at this, they could go back before they submit their answers. Now I'm going to stop for a moment. Again, we have Megan here. Megan, if there's something that I say that you want to highlight, please don't wait to the end. Please feel free at any time to come on and say something if you feel I didn't say something correctly or the need to highlight something. So please feel free to do that. Okay. But Megan is here also to answer questions in the chat at any time during my presentation. You don't have to wait to the end. Now, these are some of the key formulas that I recommend that you highlight with students. So looking at some things, perimeter, circumference, area, those things. But some minor little things that could be incorporated earlier on, because some students don't get into imaginary numbers. But something that could be incorporated earlier is simply about I squared equaling -1. That's something that could be done. About 1 degree equaling pi over 180 radians. That's something that could be done when you're talking about degrees. You could, right when you're talking about degrees with triangles, not waiting till trig, you could incorporate the idea of there's another way to identify that angle. So if students aren't going to get to radians, integrating those topics earlier in a geometry course, I think is very important. But SOHCAHTOA, again, incorporating that earlier, possibly in geometry when you're dealing with triangles, right triangles, and incorporating those kinds of problems. Pythagorean theorem, Pythagorean triples, the relationships of angles and sides. And so all of these, probability, these are just some various topics that I think are important to highlight that are helpful for students. There are no formula sheets that are given for the ACT, and so that's a little different than if you're talking about the IAR. And so the ACT, again, they need to know formulas, special triangles. These are just some examples of the problems that will be found that incorporate some of those things I said. So in this first problem, boom, if they know their triples, they can get this done fairly quickly. They know their triples and they know multiples. The second one being with SOHCAHTOA, another Pythagorean triple. So having students would traditional type math problems, having students draw those pictures. So number 20 is definitely one on a piece of paper, having students work that problem out, just traditional math. Number 28, traditional math with formula volume. And being careful when reading the units. The units could throw some students off. In this case, there might not be any change, but that's something that comes up a lot of times too, just one little change with the units. Also more with traditional math, I want to highlight on the online test. This might be helpful for students when they're reading. If you just take your cursor on the online test, you can actually highlight, if you take your cursor, it's not very obvious, but if you take your cursor and go over, let's say where it says angle A and angle C are congruent, you can then, once you highlight it, it comes up and then you can select the color you want to highlight it. So it might help students when they're reading the problem to highlight certain words. Because I know when I would teach students the paper test, underlining key words within that problem helps, or boxing certain things. So using the highlight tool on the online test, I think can be very helpful. So the first problem would be one, knowing the property of a triangle, the three angles of a triangle adding up to 180. Again, that goes back to just knowing the property. Solving for y. Traditional math, that's a key one. Being able to solve for y or solve for x, whatever it is you're trying to solve. Isolating a variable by itself. Again, these would be traditional math type problems. More traditional math, problems with consecutive integers. What is an integer? You have ratios here. Number 32 is dealing with fractions. So these are traditional math problems, which I think could take a little bit more time to do. And of course, you'll probably see something like this. Again, more with just traditional type math problems, they have to work through them. Now, this is a problem where I recommend straight calculator. Calculator, do it and move on. Now, depending on what your students use, a calculator like this, I think is very helpful because you can just see the problem and you see the number has been placed into that problem and you can calculate the answer very quickly. And so straight calculator, again, the students need to know how to use their calculator. This calculator is not the calculator that's on the online test. This is just an example of maybe a calculator students use. This, where I would just put 6/5 on my calculator, and then I would write those numbers down on a piece of paper. And I can identify then the order in decreasing order, or the biggest number first, which is 1.86, which corresponds to 13/7. So I know my answer is C or D, and the answer is C because I can see the order. Now, this is great. We could do this, but this is the first one I want to show you how awesome Desmos is. Okay, it's going to blow your mind. If you're not using Desmos, try it. So I have videos to go with this that you'll have access to, but this just shows students how they can do this. So I'm going to show you how you can use Desmos to do a problem like you see here.
So once I get to Desmos, I'm just going to type in 6 divided by 5 or 6 fraction bar 5, enter, 9 divided by 13, 13 divided by 7, and 5 divided by 3. And once I have those decimals approximation, I want to arrange it in decreasing order. So I want the biggest decimal on top. And so that's going to be 13/7. And then the next one after that's going to be 5/3 and 6/5 and 9/13. And so that is going to correspond then to choice C, which gives me my fractions in order.
So you see in real time how long that would take me. Again, doing something like this, being able to use the online, I think is a game changer. You can see it, you type it in there, it's all there on the screen, and you can rearrange it so it goes in order of what the directions are asking you for. So this is the first of a few here using the built-in Desmos graphing calculator. Another problem. Some students, if you were given this problem, they might solve this problem by using the elimination method. Multiplying the top equation by 2, eliminating the x's, solving for y. If I have only one y value that's there, then I can find the answer. But the alternative way, using Desmos. Desmos, unlike the graphing calculator, allows you to enter in the equation as is in standard form. A graphing calculator requires you to solve it for y. But the Desmos, you just type in these two equations and boom, where those two lines intersect is your solution. And so I can see on the graph, my answer is -2, 3, choice A. Boom. Love it so much. And so I'm thinking, again, incorporating Desmos is a game changer. If a student doesn't know how to solve this, as long as they know how to use Desmos, they can get the answer. So now a problem they never got before, they can get just because you've taught them how to use Desmos. Desmos now is a tool. The one thing they do have to understand is the answer, the solution is where those two lines intersect. That's where they have to understand that. And if the two lines don't intersect, then that would mean that it's no solution because they're parallel. The other thing is being able to zoom in or out because those lines might be intersecting at a point that's not visible on that screen. And so they have to zoom in or zoom out to see where those lines are crossing. So using that built-in Desmos graphing calculator. Now, a problem like this. So I'm going to show you basically 5 problems on a test that a student that knows nothing about how to how to get the equivalent expression to this, all they have to do is graph it. Simply type in y plus 7 in parentheses, and I'm going to do to the third power. It has a built-in keyboard, so I'm going to have it raised to a third power. And so when I do that, it gives me an error because Desmos only works in terms of x. So they do have to have it in terms of x. Now I can graph all of the choices and I can start with the first one. If the first expression that I'm putting into Desmos gives me the same graph as the original, that's my answer. As soon as I get a graph that basically is exactly the same, sits on top of this green graph, which this one does, boom, that's my answer. I can stop there. I don't even have to move on. But showing you here, you can just, if I type in the choice B, you can see what results, and you can see that it's not the same as the original. So in this case, choice A is my answer because the graph that was created is the same graph that was created from x plus 7 quantity cubed. And so now I can get this answer with knowing nothing about to this using Desmos as in this case, a graphing tool. Same thing for this. Again, these are problems that maybe students that are juniors that maybe did not get to this. This is a tool now. They can get this problem now on the ACT.
So we're going to type in x. We're going to raise it to the third power. We're going to do plus x squared. Raise it to the second power minus 8x. And we have minus 12. And so if you simply go over to where the graph is crossing the x-axis, those are your zeros. So we have -2 and we have 3 as the zeros for our answer here, which is choice C.
Our students are probably better at computers than us. And so having this tool now, this is in real time. So you can see how quick it is. It was less than a minute to do this, to get this solution. And so knowing this, these are problems that maybe they couldn't have done in the past, but now they can if they know how to use Desmos. Real time, you're looking at about a minute per problem is what it comes down to. About a minute per problem on this test. So if you can get the problem done in a minute, it's doable. It totally is. It also allows you then to have more time. If this took 40 seconds, it allows you to have more time for other problems that require more time than a minute. So again, this is that built-in Desmos calculator. Here's another example using the built-in Desmos graphic calculator. If I was doing this by hand, I probably would have done like a T-chart, X, Y. First one is 7. Second one is 21. Third is 35. And then you'd have to figure out the relationship. So watch this.
So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a table. And for my X values, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then over here at Y, I'm going to do 7, 21, 35, 49, and 63. And when I do that, you'll notice up here to the left, it says add regression. And so that is going to give me the line and the equation that will model that data. Now I want to know what's Y when X equals 25. So I do X equals 25, which is a vertical line, and it's not showing up on my screen. So if I go all the way over here to X equals 25, you'll see that's a vertical line. And I want to zoom out so I can see where the oblique and the vertical line intersect. And it looks like they're going to intersect at X equals 25, Y equals 343.
So the answer here is choice B. Boom. There's our solution. So I think the whole concept of having the technology really kind of turns it, instead of number punching, we're now analyzing it. We're taking it and we have to know what this means. What are we actually looking for? And also knowing if it's like a satellite image, we have to change the view of our satellite so we can see where the oblique and the vertical line intersect. And so now we can get the solution to our problem here. Again, using Desmos. One last thing with Desmos. Standard deviation. Actually, you can do mean, you can do median, and you can do standard deviation in Desmos. Mean and median are things probably students are going to know how to do. Standard deviation, they may not know how to do. Graphing calculator in Desmos will allow us to do that. So here you
So
go.
to find standard deviation, I'm just going to use the Desmos calculator, and I'm going to do the standard deviation of this population, and I'm going to put the data for each set in a set of parentheses. Now, when I do that, it gives me the standard deviation for this population, and what I can do is copy, and I can do the next 3 as well. And I can just make changes to my data set. So here I have 0, 1, I have 9, and then here I'm just going to make it 2, 3, 5, and 7. And the last one's going to be all 5s. And when I do that, it's going to give me, again, the standard deviation for each one of these populations. And then I can identify which one has the greatest standard deviation, which is number 1.
Choice F is going to be the data set with the largest standard deviation. Now, that's all some examples of how to use Desmos. Now, there's another great tool on the online test, and that is the elimination tool. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Old school, if we were doing this, we could talk about how I have 4 choices. I see this as a falling line. It's going to have a negative slope. So if it has a negative slope, I can eliminate the last choice. So now, instead of having a 25% chance of guessing, I really have a 33 and a third percent chance of guessing. I've eliminated one of the answers. I see that it's the line is intersecting a y-intercept of 2, so that means the third one doesn't work because that has a y-intercept of 3. So again, I'm eliminating. Now I have a 50-50 shot of getting it right. And so here, my answer is letter G for my answer. So that's kind of old school. If I was doing this on paper, I could kind of mark off eliminating choices to get my final answer. On the online ACT test, there is an elimination tool. So let me show you how that works here.
So with the ACT Online, there is an eliminate answer button. And so we know that the product should be negative 30. This doesn't give us a product of negative 30. So I can just click it. All of these give us this negative 30, but we want a sum that's negative 1. That will be a positive 1. So these will cancel, leaving us with choice C.
So again, this is just a tool that might help students visualize what is going to be left after they kind of think through the problem. In this case, I could have gone to my paper, but this was me kind of rationalizing through the problem. And again, depending on maybe your students want to do that, or they're reasoning through the process of getting that answer. Either way, that eliminator tool is kind of helpful to see on the screen for the
So,
online test. Now, besides traditional math calculator, the Desmos graphing calculator, and the eliminating tool, picking numbers is another strategy students can use. So with a case like this, it's recommended to avoid picking 0 or 1 if I'm going to pick numbers. And Kaplan, the Kaplan is ACT's kind of the company they work with. Kaplan recommends avoiding 0 and 1 because they have special properties. So in this case, I'm just going to pick a number for A that's less than B. And so I'm going to say that A is 2 and B is 5. I'm just going to pick two numbers. And so I'm going to work through this. And so I get A minus B to be 3. So if I know that A is less than B, then the absolute value of A minus B is going to be equivalent to one of these things. So I can kind of use those numbers I picked. In the first case, it would be 7, which doesn't match 3. So that doesn't work. In the second case, -7 doesn't equal 3. That doesn't work. So again, picking numbers that meet the criteria that's given, but when picking numbers, avoiding 0 and 1 because they could have special properties. And again, that is a source from CAP test, which is involved directly with ACT. Another way for test taking strategies is by showing students, it's very similar to picking numbers, but in this case, you're picking numbers that are the possible answers. And this is called back solving. So what that means is you're going to work the problem by picking one of the answers. And if that doesn't work, you pick another one of the answers and see if it works. When there used to be 5 choices, it was recommended that you would always start with letter C with that problem or with that number that corresponds to C. Now that there are only 4 multiple choice answers, it is suggested that you either start with B or C. In my case, I always like to start with B, as if Carol is 12. That is what I'm going to work the problem at. And I'm going to see if that comes out to be right. So let's say Carol is 12. If that's the case, and Jerry's age is 5 more than 3 times Carol's, then that would mean Jerry's age is 41. But that would make the sum of their ages 53. And 53 is too much. 53 is more than 45. So what that tells me is, since I originally selected 12, since that gave me a sum that was greater than 45, I know that my answer has to be less than 12, and the only choice here is 10. So I could just pick choice A. And I'm just going to show you here that the result ends up being 45. And so I went through this process, but technically I wouldn't have to do that. As soon as I know that it has to be less than 12, the only answer that's possible is 10, which makes it choice A. So again, this is back solving, trying one of the answers and putting it in and seeing if it works. And if it doesn't, how does it relate to what it should be? In this case, it was too much. So my answer had to be something less than 12. Again, this is back solving. Now, once you've given students test taking strategies, this is where you can do the ACT practice test yourself before you would have students do it. You could just click on practice test, mathematics, the time test, put your name in if you want, but it goes through this, and then you can go through the process of doing those 45 problems. And then at the end, it'll tell you which ones you got right and which ones you got wrong. So in this case, question 1, the student score was 0. That means they got it wrong. If they got 1, they got it right. So anything that's a 0, they got wrong. And if they got a 1, they got it right. And that would be the case for you or the student. Before, though, you would have the students take the ACT practice test, there's a few other things I would recommend. One thing is I would encourage you to start incorporating matrices. Even matrices can be started back in 8th grade. They can be incorporated. When you're talking about arrays, or you're talking about adding or subtracting integers, or if you're just simply talking about multiplication of integers, matrices should be incorporated earlier into the curriculum. These are very easy points on the ACT with just a little bit of an introduction, a little bit of a knowledge of what matrices are. Now, once you are given these students test taking strategies, I encourage you to integrate ACT type problems into daily work, into daily, whether they're warm ups, homework problems. ACT website has free sample math practice problems. And so you can see what that looks like. It's a little confusing, I think. I'm not sure why, but it gives 6 practice problems for 50 minutes. So that's be careful about that. I'm not sure if that's just a glitch when I looked at it, but be careful. Just go to next, and it'll give you those 6 practice items with the looks very similar there in terms of ABCD choices. The Kaplan site also has practice problems that you can use as well. Again, just more practice problems. The more practice, the more confident students can be. And so Kaplan's problems are here. They have 5 practice problems available, and you see what those look like here. Again, they have 4 choices available for these multiple choice problems. Kaplan also has a sample class. Kaplan does have things that cost, but I'm showing you all these free things. So there's video. This video is dated as the previous ACT had 5 multiple choice possibilities. And so just know there's 5 here, but it's still good practice with the ACT sample class practice. ISBE also has some practice problems through something that's new this year called the performance level descriptors. Everything you see here, you have access to the direct link that will take you there. And so samples of success, you'll see that there are grades 9 through 12. And if you just click on algebra samples to success or whatever samples to success you're looking at, it gives you various problems from below proficient to above proficient. And so I would look at the proficient and above proficient as examples for you. But it gives you the topic and it gives you examples that go with that topic. Another source from various platforms for problems, again, these are free sample problems, is collegeprep.uworld.com. These are things that you could pick or just have your students work on. They again have 4 multiple choice answers to select from. Manhattan Review, again, these are 10 practice problems, and it gives from challenging, easy to medium, hard. It gives you levels for students to do. ACT has Quiz Me problems. There are 7 questions here. So maybe after you've given students practice problems, now you're going to have them do these with time restraints. So maybe they have to do these 7 problems in 7 minutes. No matter what you're doing, though, I think it's important that you go over those problems or you have a reference. Maybe you don't have time to go over them. Maybe you have a video or you just have answers that are worked out that show them or explain to them how to get that answer. Because if you just give them problems and they get them wrong without knowing what they should have done, the problem itself is not helpful. If we make mistakes and learn from them, definitely worth the mistake to do better on the ACT. But going over them or having a video or something to help them is necessary. The Testing Center Compass Prep.com has 12 free practice problems. Again, maybe you give them 12 problems in 15 minutes. Technically, each problem on the ACT is 1 minute and 6 seconds. So maybe doing something like this gives them a little bit more time instead of 12 problems in 12 minutes. But it gives them those restraints, the time restraints. HighSchoolTestPrep.com, more problems. Again, it gives ACT easy, medium, difficult, advanced, just different levels. But these are just resources, free problems that you could give students. So you're not searching for them. Now, once you've given students the strategies, you've given them practice problems, giving them the opportunity to do an ACT practice test, I think is crucial. I really do. if you give them this practice test that is online, I think it's also important for them to figure out what their math scale score would be. So their raw score is what they would get. Their scale score would be like what their ACT score would be for math. And it's important to know there are 45 problems on the ACT, but some of them are not actually scored. They may be testing, the ACT might be testing those. They're experimental, they're testing those. And so they're showing here on this score sheet which problems were actually not scored. They give the answer though, which I like, but it's not part of the student's score. This is a great resource through another state that has all of the problems worked out with a video. And so that's a great, if you just want to have them do it, give them the resource, it works them out. I don't agree with all the different ways maybe that they solve them, but it's a good way to give students worked out problems. And again, you could do practice tests that are on paper. This is another tool, practice test 2, with the scores available as well as the key. ACT guide is a book that you could purchase, or maybe your library, your school purchases it. This book gives you 3 more practice tests. It says 4, but it's technically 3 because the first practice test is the one that's already online that you have available. I like this book because it does give problems, but it also gives answers as well as explanations for those answers and explanations of why the wrong answers might have been selected. And I think that's really important to talk about. So that's, I think, a great tool. It does cost. This is the only thing that I'm showing you that does have a price tag on it. I think I got it from Amazon for like $32. And if you have any paper tests, taking those and maybe making Google form tests that students are just used to taking the test on the computer instead of doing it on the paper. Maybe you just do 5 problems, just 5 more to give practice. And the last thing I want to talk about is it's interesting to note that if a student takes one test and another student takes a different test, their raw scores and their scale scores could be different. So on practice test 1, the math raw score was a 37. The scale score, or the ACT score, was 34. But on the practice 2 test, the raw score was 37 and the math scale score was 33. So it's important to note that they're not always going to be the same. The raw score on one test is not going to correlate to the scale score on another test. It's important to highlight that, I think, for students to understand that. If you have questions that we can have Megan answer at this time that maybe were not answered, I would love for you to ask those either in the chat box or unmute and ask those at this time as well. And then I'm going to ask Kyle if there's anything that wasn't answered, if you could ask those questions for me, I'd appreciate that.
The only thing, Kelly, that got typed into the box was from Sally. It said, "Do you know the 13 equations students should memorize?" But I think you may have gone over equations in your slides 2C, so you may have hit that.
Mm-hmm. And you'll have access. Those are what I recommend in terms of what students should know, but you'll have access to that in the slides, so you can go back and look at those and go over those with your students. Megan, if you have anything you want to highlight, I want to make sure you're here. I want to utilize you.
Sure. I just want to thank you for having me, and also thank you teachers for all you do in the classroom every day. I think Kelly has done a fantastic job of compiling some additional resources beyond what we have linked from our webpage. Just one more nugget I would throw out. I only taught mathematics for about 5 years, but one of the things I noticed is that sometimes kids will guess and get the answer right, and then they'll just move on. So if they know they've guessed, they should really be looking at those explanations of how, why the answer they guessed was right. So kind of don't cheat in that respect, but there's a lot of emphasis. If you get it wrong, look at how it's done, but also if you get it right and you guessed, have another look at that as well. But no, the resources you came up with in this are fantastic, and I think it's really, really helpful if you expose the kids to the actual format. She's done a brilliant job of showing you like all those things if the kids are well versed in how to navigate that environment before test day.
Again, I want to thank Megan for being here, for providing resources, ISBE for providing resources. There is the customer support ACT helpline. Again, I want to thank Kyle, former ICTM board member, current ICTM member, math department chair, teacher, overall fantastic person. Thank you, Kyle, for helping today.
No problem. Thank you, Kelly. This was great.
And if you have questions, you can always reach out to me. And again, thank you so much for attending today's session.